fear and panic has grip. Nigerian President Bola Ahmed Tinubu as Donald Trump. Powerful speech during his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States of America, shake Nigeria terrorist government. Donald Trump was inaugurated as the 47th U.S. President, marking his return to power after losing re-election 4 years earlier. Donald Trump signed around 200 executive orders on day one, covering immigration, birthright citizenship, and pardoning nearly all January 6th insurrectionists. He pardoned nearly 1,500 rioters, leading to protests and scuffles outside the Washington, D.C. correctional facility. He introduced measures to classify cartels as terrorist organizations and end birthright citizenship, raising questions about feasibility and legality. Donald Trump proposed taxing foreign nations through tariffs to enrich Americans and established an external revenue service for this purpose. He declared that only two genders, male and female, would be officially recognized by the U.S. government. Donald Trump announced the U.S. withdrawal from the World Health Organization, WHO, and the Paris Climate Accord, sparking concerns about global leadership and climate change efforts. Bold claims included renaming the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America and reclaiming the Panama Canal, signaling potential international tensions. Donald Trump recounted assassination attempts and legal battles, stating his belief that God spared him to make America great again. His speeches included attacks on political opponents like Liz Cheney, controversial statements on Biden's administration, and challenges to existing democratic norms, sparking mixed reactions domestically and internationally. Let me tell you about something extraordinary that happened recently, something that has the whole world talking. It's a story of power, ambition, and how one man's bold vision sent shockwaves across continents. We're going to travel across oceans, from the heart of Washington, D.C., to the bustling streets of Lagos, Nigeria, and back again. It's a tale of Donald John Trump, the businessman turned politician who has never been far from the headlines, and how his triumphant return to the presidency of the United States has left world leaders, including Nigeria's Bola Ahmed Tinubu, grappling with uncertainty and fear. It all started on a crisp January morning in Washington, D.C. The city was abuzz with excitement and tension as Donald John Trump prepared to take the oath of office as the 47th President of the United States. For many, it felt like déjà vu. Just 4 years ago, Donald John Trump had lost his re-election bid, and it seemed like his political career was over. But if there's one thing you can say about Donald John Trump, it's that he never gives up. And now, here he was, standing on the steps of the United States Capitol, ready to reclaim the presidency in a way only Donald John Trump could. The crowd was enormous, stretching as far as the eye could see. Supporters waved flags, wore red hats, and chanted slogans like "Make America Great Again" and "Trump 2024." The atmosphere was electric, a mix of celebration and defiance. As Donald John Trump took the stage, you could feel the anticipation in the air. Love him or hate him, everyone knew that whatever he was about to say would be unforgettable. Donald John Trump began his speech with a declaration that sent the crowd into a frenzy. "America's decline is over," he said, his voice booming with conviction. The words were simple but powerful, capturing the essence of his campaign. He spoke about the struggles the country had faced and how his leadership would bring about a new era of prosperity and strength. It was classic Donald John Trump, bold, unapologetic, and full of promises. But this wasn't just about rhetoric. Donald John Trump had a lot to say about his journey back to power, and it was a journey filled with drama and danger. He recounted a harrowing moment during his campaign when an assassin's bullet narrowly missed him. "I believe God saved me to make America great again," he said, his voice filled with emotion. The crowd erupted in cheers, and for a moment, it felt like the entire nation was holding its breath. Whether you believe in divine intervention or not, There was no denying that Donald John Trump saw himself as a man on a mission. Then came the policies. Oh, the policies. If there's one thing Donald John Trump is known for, it's shaking things up. And he wasted no time in doing just that. On his very first day in office, he signed a staggering 200 executive orders. 200. That's not just a statement, it's an earthquake. Among these orders were some of the most controversial decisions of his career. He pardoned nearly 1,500 people who had been convicted for their roles in the January 6th Capitol riot. He announced plans to end birthright citizenship, a move that would undoubtedly face legal challenges. And he took the unprecedented step of classifying Mexican cartels as terrorist organizations. These decisions sparked immediate reactions both at home and abroad. In the United States, people were either celebrating or protesting, depending on their political views. Outside the Washington, D.C. correctional facility, where many of the January 6th rioters had been held, crowds gathered to protest their pardons. Meanwhile, legal scholars and politicians were already gearing up for battles over the constitutionality of some of Donald John Trump's policies. But the ripple effects didn't stop at America's borders. Halfway across the world, in Nigeria, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and his government were watching closely and with growing concern. You see, Donald John Trump's speech wasn't just about domestic policy. It was about reshaping the global order, and that meant countries like Nigeria could be profoundly affected. One of the most striking moments of Donald John Trump's speech was when he announced a new policy to impose tariffs on foreign nations. He described it as a way to enrich the American people by ensuring that other countries paid their fair share. He even introduced a new agency called the External Revenue Service to manage these tariffs. For a country like Nigeria, which relies heavily on international trade, this was alarming news. The thought of higher tariffs on Nigerian exports to the United States was enough to send shivers down the spines of Bola Ahmed Tinubu's economic advisors. And it wasn't just the tariffs. Donald John Trump also made a series of cultural and symbolic declarations that left many people around the world scratching their heads. He proclaimed that there are only two genders, a statement that reignited debates over gender and identity. He also announced that the Gulf of Mexico would now be called the Gulf of America, a move that seemed more symbolic than practical, but nonetheless stirred controversy. Back in Nigeria, the mood was tense. Bola Ahmed Tinubu and his team reportedly felt a deep sense of unease. Nigeria, like many countries, has a complex relationship with the United States. On one hand, the United States is a crucial trading partner and a source of economic and military aid. On the other hand, policies like Donald John Trump's tariffs and his unpredictable approach to international relations could pose significant challenges. For Bola Ahmed Tinubu, navigating this new reality would require careful diplomacy and strategic thinking. But let's not forget that Donald John Trump's return to power wasn't without its critics. In Washington, D.C. and beyond, opposition voices were loud and clear. One of the most vocal critics was Nancy Patricia Pelosi, the longtime Democratic leader. Nancy Patricia Pelosi didn't mince words when she condemned Donald John Trump's decision to pardon the January 6th rioters. She called it an outrageous insult to justice and warned that it could embolden extremists. Environmentalists were also up in arms over Donald John Trump's decision to withdraw the United States from the Paris Climate Accord. This move, which Donald John Trump justified as protecting American jobs, was seen by many as a step backward in the fight against climate change. Similarly, his withdrawal from the World Health Organization raised concerns about global health cooperation, especially in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite the controversy, Donald John Trump's supporters remained steadfast. For them, his inauguration was a moment of triumph, a sign that their voices had been heard. They gathered in ballrooms across Washington, D.C. to celebrate, dancing and cheering as Donald John Trump and his First Lady took to the dance floor. The energy was palpable, a mix of relief, joy, and defiance. As the celebrations continued into the night, the world watched and wondered what the future would hold. For Donald John Trump, the mission was clear: to reshape America in his image, no matter the cost. For leaders like Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the challenge was equally clear: to navigate a new global landscape where unpredictability and boldness were the order of the day. So, here we are, at the beginning of a new chapter in global politics. Donald John Trump is back, and whether you see him as a hero or a disruptor, there's no denying that he's a force to be reckoned with. His policies and rhetoric have set the stage for a turbulent but fascinating era. And as for Nigeria and Bola Ahmed Tinubu, only time will tell how they will adapt to this new reality. This story is far from over. In fact, it's just beginning. And as the world grapples with the impact of Donald John Trump's return to power, one thing is certain: we're all in for a wild ride. The story of Donald John Trump's return to power didn't just end with his inauguration. That day was just the spark for what would become a series of events that rippled across the globe, testing alliances, challenging norms, and in many ways, redefining what leadership looked like in the 21st century. After the celebrations in Washington, D.C. settled, the real work began. Donald John Trump's administration wasted no time pushing forward its agenda. His team, a mix of loyalists and controversial figures, was tasked with executing the policies that Donald John Trump had promised on the campaign trail. Every day brought a new headline, and every decision seemed to be a deliberate move to either consolidate his power or shake up the status quo. One of the first major international moves came in the form of tariffs. Remember those? Well, they weren't just words in a speech. Within weeks of taking office, the United States announced a series of steep tariffs on imports from countries like China, Mexico, and yes, Nigeria. The reasoning, as Donald John Trump explained in a fiery press conference, was simple. America has been taken advantage of for too long. Those days are over. The tariffs sent shockwaves through global markets. Nigerian exports, particularly oil, were heavily affected. Nigeria, being one of the largest oil exporters in Africa, relied on the United States as a major trading partner. Bola Ahmed Tinubu's government scrambled to respond. Economists warned that the new tariffs could lead to a significant reduction in revenue for Nigeria, potentially affecting everything from infrastructure projects to healthcare funding. Back in Abuja, the capital of Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu called an emergency meeting with his top advisors. The room was filled with tension as they discussed their options. One advisor suggested opening talks with China to strengthen economic ties and reduce Nigeria's reliance on the United States. Another proposed a more aggressive stance, including the possibility of retaliatory tariffs. But Bola Ahmed Tinubu knew that any misstep could escalate the situation, and Nigeria's fragile economy couldn't afford a prolonged standoff with the world's largest economy. Meanwhile, Donald John Trump continued to dominate headlines. His domestic policies were as polarizing as ever. In a move that surprised even his closest allies, he announced a sweeping immigration reform package. This package included measures like building new sections of the wall along the southern border, ending birthright citizenship, and introducing a merit-based immigration system. Critics called the policies discriminatory and harmful to vulnerable communities, but Donald John Trump supporters saw them as fulfilling campaign promises. The changes to immigration policy didn't just affect people in the United States. Across Africa, families and individuals hoping to immigrate to America faced new hurdles. In Lagos, Nigeria's largest city, immigration lawyers were inundated with calls from clients trying to understand how the new rules would affect their visa applications. For many, the American dream seemed further out of reach than ever before. But not all of Donald John Trump's policies were met with resistance. His focus on energy independence and deregulation gained support from certain sectors. In Texas, for example, Oil and gas companies applauded his decision to roll back regulations, arguing that it would create jobs and boost the economy. Donald John Trump used this momentum to further his America First agenda, positioning the United States as a dominant energy producer on the global stage. For Bola Ahmed Tinubu and other leaders in oil-dependent nations, this was another blow. As the United States ramped up its production, global oil prices began to fluctuate. Nigeria, which relied heavily on oil exports for its revenue, found itself in a precarious position. Bola Ahmed Tinubu knew that diversifying Nigeria's economy was no longer just a long-term goal, it was an immediate necessity.
Trump was inaugurated for the second time Monday afternoon, becoming one of just 2 U.S. presidents to return to the White House after losing re-election 4 years earlier. Trump said that the United States will rename the Gulf of Mexico, enrich Americans with the proceeds of tariff, and recognize male and female as the only genders in a memorable post-inauguration speech. While 3 inaugural balls were simultaneously taking place to celebrate U.S. President Donald Trump's new presidency, Trump signed sweeping executive orders into power. Among them is the full pardon for nearly all 1,500 January 6th rioters. Many are expected to be released within hours, with a crowd forming already outside the jail in Washington, D.C., where the defendants are being held. Arise News international correspondent Adefemi Akinsanya has this report.
From this moment on, America's decline is over.
And so it begins, Donald Trump delivering his first speech since his swearing in. The 47th President of the United States spared no blushes when he shared his plan for the future.
Places from which
His speech cemented the beginning of this new era of democracy, and at the same time, the departure of what was before. After bidding farewell to former President Joe Biden and former First Lady Dr. Jill Biden, Trump spoke again, this time far more candidly in the Emancipation Room.
the journey to reclaim our republic has not been an easy one, that I can tell you. Those who wish to stop our cause have tried to take my freedom and indeed to take my life. Just a few months ago in a beautiful Pennsylvania field, an assassin's bullet ripped through my ear. But I felt then, and believe even more so now, that my life was saved for a reason. I was saved by God to make America great again.
Sir, this is a proclamation declaring a national emergency at the southern border of the United States.
And then, true to his word, Donald Trump got to business, signing some 200 executive orders covering immigration, birthright citizenship, and most notably, the January 6th insurrection. Nearly all 1,500 of them have been pardoned in a sweeping move that caught many by surprise, including Nancy Pelosi, who took to social media to say the order was an outrageous insult to the U.S. justice system. Nevertheless, crowds gathered outside the jail in Washington, D.C., where rioters are being held. And the engagements continued on Trump's first night back in power. At the Commander-in-Chief inaugural ball, the first of 3 balls taking place simultaneously in Washington, D.C., the new president and his first lady danced together with the new vice president and the new second lady. And as they dance the night away, their moves mirror the first steps in this new journey towards building an America first for the second time. Adefemi Akinsanya, Arise News, Washington, D.C.
Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Adefemi, good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Rubin. Good morning, Al. Good morning, Rufai. I hope you're all doing well. What a night it has been. We haven't been able to take too much time away from looking at what we've been seeing with this historic inauguration of Donald Trump and his second administration starting on Monday. We've now moved into Tuesday. And it was, as we heard in the package, quite an interesting one. When we first start with his swearing-in ceremony and then, of course, his first address as president, as the 47th president, he spoke to some extent in quite a mature way. Many parts of his speech was quite poignant. He talked a lot about his personal struggles that we've seen in the lead up to this position, most notably his legal issues, but also he was able to weave those legal issues into the assassination attempts on his life during the election cycle. He did talk about how they had tried to take his freedom and also tried to take his life. And then also, as we heard there in the package, he mentioned he believed that God spared his life in order for him to make America great again. And then when we are talking about America great again, that does bring us into these sweeping executive orders. I'd already mentioned during the package one of the more popular ones, one of the more controversial ones, which is this widely sweeping pardoning of nearly all 1,500 January 6 rioters. Now, what we're seeing with this issue is it's taken many people by surprise, because even in the very early hours of his inauguration, it wasn't clear what he was going to do. He delivered two speeches after he was sworn in. The first proper post-inaugural address, which he delivered in the presence of course, former President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, both of them listening in to what he had to say. And he spoke, as I said, quite with a lot more candor, talking about, yes, there was a few light punches thrown towards the Biden administration, talking about how this is the time for America's future. This is time for them to regain and really restore any lost faith they had in the country and democracy. And then he spoke after seeing Joe Biden off. He came back into the building to speak in the Emancipation Room. And there you could tell that was Donald Trump's own thoughts, his own mind. That wasn't the refined speech that we heard the first time. And during that second speech, he talked about how he wanted to talk during the inaugural address about Biden far more critically, and he wasn't given the opportunity to, but he then went on to do so. He also spoke quite colourfully about Liz Cheney, referring to her as a lunatic. And again, as I said, when it comes to Donald Trump and the type of language that we have come to know him by, that second speech he gave in the Emancipation Room was definitely far more along those lines. And it was then that we first got the first hint of this January 6th insurrection, because he mentioned in the second speech that he does have plans for talking about January 6th and that he hasn't forgotten them. But as I said, it did take many people by surprise. That being said, it is believed, according to some reports, that some of the people who are currently incarcerated will be released within hours, according to this executive order. And that's why we're seeing crowds outside the DC Correctional Facility here in Washington, D.C., where many people are outside. It's resulted into some scuffles between press, people who are protesting, people who are welcoming the January 6 rioters back into society, and of course the security personnel outside the prison, outside the jail there. But just to show that so much is happening so quickly when it comes to these executive orders. And then another one that really shook many people, took them by surprise, was of course his immigration policies. He talked about how he would continue to follow through with his promises, with looking at how he would designate the cartels operating in Mexico and Southern America over the other side of the border as terrorist organizations. This has also ruffled a lot of feathers, because they're looking at the legality, the process by which his executive orders can actually come into fruition, especially then when we're talking about ending birthright citizenship. He also signed an executive order to that effect. But then again, that does reignite conversations on how feasible that's going to be, because that would mean repealing an amendment which is enshrined in the US Constitution. So a lot of back and forth when it comes to very early parts of his administration. He has not been in office for more than 24 hours, but true to his word, he has come with action. Now, going back to his inaugural address, there are a few things that really stood out. As I said, definitely immigration, but also him talking about tax and how he wants tariffs to benefit the American people. This is another example of him showing how he's going to put America first. Talking about this tax issue, let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Instead of taxing our citizens to enrich other countries, we will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our For this purpose, we are establishing the External Revenue Service to collect all tariffs, duties, and revenues. It will be massive amounts of money pouring into our Treasury.
Again, when we're talking about this massive money that he says will be pouring into the Treasury, this is still, at this point, just words, isn't it? And we will be very interesting to see how he's going to be able to execute these plans into real fruition. But when you're looking at him being such a popular president, him being able to win the popular vote and the Electoral College vote, a lot of people, if you remember back in November, were talking about how he was going to bring a lot more money into the country, make the everyday person far more affluent when it comes to being prosperous in this country, that he is going to be the president to lead them and put them first. So to that effect, we are seeing that take shape in these executive orders. And then also, quite controversially, he talked about gender. Now, gender is quite interesting because he's gone back and forth about his feelings on gender identity, gender categories. But this is what he had to say in terms of what the American, under his watch, will be recognizing as gender. Let's take a listen.
It will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
Something that came up with a lot of applause, a lot of adulation when it came to that specific issue about gender. So as you can see, he spoke for 30 minutes in this post-inaugural address, and it did have a lot of talking points. As I said, lots of powerful moments. He talked about how the American people should understand that with him, he will fight for them and he will win for them. Again, something that really resonated with the crowd. And then he also talked about, I guess, the future of democracy under his watch, what it will look like in terms of foreign policy. He did talk about how he wants to continue to be a pacifist, wants to be a peacemaker in the world. It will be interesting to see what that looks like when we're looking at all of the international backdrop, especially with Middle East. Of course, he gave himself a self-congratulations about this Middle East ceasefire coming into effect the day before his inauguration. But as I said, he did still ruffle a lot of international feathers. He talked about how the Gulf of Mexico would be renamed the Gulf of America, and then also said the Panama Canal would be taken back from Panama. So again, while he is talking about creating peace in some areas of the world, it does seem as though he's trying to move towards the opposite in other areas too. So a very, very interesting first almost 24 hours of a Trump presidency, and as you can imagine, there's still pretty more to come. I'd love to hear your thoughts before we move on to the papers.
Okay, so Femi, I'll disagree with you on some things. You said very mature speech. I didn't see maturity. In fact, I saw a lot of puerile, petulant vituperations in that speech. And I think the more mature person was Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Trump did not attend Joe Biden's inauguration because he was sulking like a little baby that he is. And we cannot forget that. And he went ahead there slamming Biden, saying, oh, I'm going to do so much as regards inflation, where there's already an Inflation Reduction Act. Most of those revenues he says he's going to bring to the economy is the Inflation Reduction Act passed by Biden that will bring them into the economy. So there were a lot of lies, because when you see those growth, know that it is Biden's work that will start to kick in over the years. He went ahead and he told a big lie yesterday when he was adulating America for what he said that America split atom. No, Ernest Rutherford split the atom. He was a New Zealander. Then he went further to try justify all his crimes by saying, oh, the system has been used against him. But he committed those. I mean, Femi, didn't you remember, are the tapes not there when Trump was calling to look for 11,000 votes to win elections in Georgia? Did we forget? Why is it that the world holds Trump with another standard? Didn't we see the videos of him saying he's going to grab a woman by the pee? Didn't we see the Stormy Daniels episode? In fact, the judicial system was too fair. Some Democrats have said, in fact, the likes of Merrick Garland was too lenient on Trump because they were so afraid of what people will say that it was a witch hunt. Most of the cases never even sailed through because of prosecutorial delays. Then he did the big one, going ahead to forgive insurrectionists. Because a man never won elections, he brought insurrectionists, tried to pull down his country. after trying everything, such a bad loser? Or did he not think that Kamala Harris felt bad sitting there yesterday that she lost the election? Today, they are going to forgive people. So, you know, I saw the American motto while Trump was dancing on the ground, which says, "E pluribus unum," which means first among any. Can Americans truly say they are first among many, where they forgive people that are insurrectionists, that try to destroy the fabric of their democracy because somebody did not win an election? Can Americans truly say they are first among many, where the right of being an American is now being taken away because one man feels for him to be nationalist, he has to take away constitutional provisions of where you are born in the country, you become a citizen? Can America truly think that they are e pluribus unum when they are trying to pull out of multilateral institutions like the World Health Organization and the Paris Agreement in a world that needs a lot of direction that America claims they give direction to? Can America truly claim that they are first among many with all of the division he's going to bring about, which he has started yesterday? I think it's a food for thought for America. Good morning, the land of the Pilgrim's Pride.
All right, okay, so a number of things yesterday, and thank you very much, Adefemi, for detailing some of the highlights of yesterday's inauguration. You're absolutely correct. What he said, his post-inaugural speech at the Emancipation Room was was weightier than what he had said during his formal inauguration speech. And I dare say that it's great that he listened to his VP and First Lady by not doing that properly, because it was insulting enough for the Democrats and the 46th president who was seated there alongside his vice president to see a lot of the legacies and policies that introduced eroded with slight insults to them by the president. But he did even worse afterwards. But let's break down some of the executive orders which he signed, and it was a flurry of signature and very theatrical in the style of now the 45th and 47th president of the United States of America, Donald Trump, before an audience that was cheering him on and really supportive of him. With regards to the insurrectionists, you already said it. I mean, I think Nancy Pelosi captures it well, the feelings of a number of people with regards to how these about 1,500 people are regarded by the law. They went through the justice system and they were found guilty and sentenced to prison. However, through this executive order, he has overturned that. In some instances, 14 of them were commutation. So it means that even though they will be pardoned or released from prison, the charges will still remain on their records. He had said this. I had watched, the procedure when he had gone in to sit the first, his first signing, the initial signing he had done. He had said that he was going to review some of the cases, and the more violent ones, perhaps he might not grant them a full pardon. So that was in alignment with what he had said. Beyond that, I think the great concern is the withdrawal of the United States from the World Health Organization. What it looks like is the fundamental role that the United States plays in the WHO, especially as a superpower, as a world power. The concern there is that gap would need to be filled. And guess who will be ready to step into those shoes? China. So it gives an opportunity for China to step up and even take the advantage to then, fill in that space in terms of big funding, decision making at the WHO. That's quite dangerous. So let's see how that would pan out. The same, if you look at the Paris Climate Accord or the Paris Agreement with regards to climate change, we've often talked about the fact that President Donald Trump is a climate denier, and he has said that he was going to pull out on day one, which he has done. What would this mean for climate change, around the world? Recall that accord has said that they want to reduce, global warming by down to 2 degrees. So it means that they're eroding the work that has been done over the years. A number of things that have been spoken about, migration, whilst it looks all great and bold, and he's making America great again. My concern, and I end here, is that President Donald Trump, alongside his supporters, might be living in an America of many years ago, and he's alluded to that in terms of the people that he respects. The world has changed, the world has moved on, the world has become a global village. So it's not the same way he would have been able to achieve these things many years ago as it is today. Let's see how successful the executive orders will be once Congress meets.
Okay, I watched the inauguration ceremony yesterday at the Capitol, and also at the Capital One Arena, where there was also another event, and most of what was shown. And immediately, I jumped on the laptop and wrote over 2,000 words commentary, something I've been doing since 1985. So I've already, tried to write out what I thought I saw and remembered in a back page column in this day newspaper today. But to the specific issues that you raised, I think that Trump was Trump yesterday, either at the Rotunda or at the Capital One Arena. And whatever he may have said yesterday will seem to be consistent with his campaign promises. Whether you are talking about his decision to say, look, under his government, the policy will be that gender is man and woman, and that all federal policies under his administration will be consistent with that. Hard right, conservative, whatever. And then he moved on to DEI, diversity, equality, and inclusion programs. Now, this will have very serious implications for what exists in the United States at the moment. And he has already signed off on that. He talked about remain in Mexico. During the campaign, he said he would build a wall to keep out the Mexicans. He wasn't saying anything new. He's been very consistent in that regard. He said, drill, baby, drill. In other words, he's not interested in all these climate change, fossil fuel issues. He wants America to produce more oil and gas and create wealth and prosperity for the people. What again did he do yesterday? He's going to release the J6 gang, the January 6, 2021 gang, and he's already signed off on that. The people are already massing up in front of the prisons, expecting the people to come out. So there was nothing, just to be brief, that he did yesterday that was in any way surprising. And in any case, in terms of the crowd that gathered, you could see the connection between politics and capital. All the tech giants, the big men, Mark Zuckerberg, all of them, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, jumping up and down. He even went there, with his young son. He showed up with one woman who has 3 children for him out of excitement. All of that, was expected. But in the speech, however, the thing to worry about is the implications for the global order. Panama's president has already responded to say, look, the Panama Canal is not a gift, a foolish gift, he called it, and that in any case, it belongs to Panama. You are going to get a lot of that, in terms of the trade and tariffs and, how he wants to make America great again. At a personal level, he made it clear that God saved him to make America great again. But is it only America that will be great again? What is the implication for the rest of the world? I think that's something we should be worried about, because, yeah, Trump may make America great again, but is he going to make the world smaller? And that is why there is this concern about how he will disrupt the global order. And there are reactions from Panama to Greenland to Ukraine to Russia to China, and even here in Africa, we're wondering, what does a Trump presidency mean for us? But at the end of the day, it is the people of America who have spoken. And they say, in the opening statements, that this is about the people, the choice that the people of America have made. They will have to live with it, but the rest of the world will also be affected. That's the dilemma that we face with Trump 2.0.
Indeed it is. And we can talk about this issue for ages to come. I'm sure this Trump presidency will continue to give us plenty more talking points. But I know we have run out of time. Very quickly to run through some Nigerian papers. Looking at the front covers of these papers, starting of course with This Day, you will struggle in the world today to find a front page of a newspaper that does not have a picture of Donald Trump on it. And This Day, leading the pack, does also have a picture of the new president for his second term on its cover. This day also talks about the 2025 budget, about how the Humanitarian Affairs Ministry is seeking 260 billion naira to create 2 million jobs. Another story that's really taking the lead of Nigerian papers, other than, of course, the inauguration, is this telecom story. Now, if we look at the front page of the New Telegraph, it talks about how the NCC has approved a 50% tariff increase for phone calls, data, and SMS. They're saying that this is in response to the prevailing market conditions and adjustments approved after due consultations. We do know that the telcos have struggled to source money, so this really shouldn't come as a surprise. And staying to that tune, the Daily Independent also leads with the NCC okaying this 50% tariff hike. The Daily Sun this morning looks at the military and unfortunately mentions other terrorists in addition to Turji's son have been killed. They talked about the dismantling of 23 illegal refineries and major states in 3 different states, and also the killing of 11 bandits and the rescuing of 207 abducted children and foiled attacks in both Kogi and Katsina states. The Daily Trust actually is one of the papers that doesn't actually have a picture of the inauguration, but it looks at how the federal government has again re-awarded the Abuja-Kaduna highway contract to an inactive company. Those are your papers from Nigeria. I know we've run out of time, but thank you very much for your time and look forward to speaking to you once again.
Well, thank you very much, Adefemi, for your analysis or your news brief this morning. Indeed, a lot more to talk about, and hopefully in the course of the show today we'll still be reviewing some of the executive orders signed by the 47th President of the United States of America, newly inaugurated.
This is the end of our news update. Please click the icon on the top right corner of your screen to watch my next video. You will enjoy it. I will see you again in my next update. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye for now.